Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad you're here with us today. This is Let's Grow Kids' third webinar titled Managing the New Normal, Caring for Your Staff and Yourself During Uncertainty. I'm Emily Blistein. I'm the Business Strategy Director at Let's Grow. And for today's webinar, we're going to spend about the first 30 minutes on really a self-care toolkit for you. And then we'll have about 20 minutes of Q&A. So to do the toolkit, we're joined by three of our consultants and panelists: Lawrence Miller of Five Vine Consulting, Angela Earl Gray of Adaptiva HR, Erica Schramm of Skylight Consulting and Coaching. And as always, during these webinars, I also want to direct you to the Let's Grow Kids coronavirus page that has up-to-date resources for parents, early educators, and employers. It includes all of the past webinars that we've done and any FAQs that accompany that. We also want to remind you that in addition to these webinars, we've set up a new free consulting service for you, engaging a lot of the panelists that you're seeing on these webinars. And the goal is really to help support you during this time, because there's so many new questions that are coming up. And so we're matching you individually with these consultants to deal with some of those more personalized questions to your business. This webinar in particular, if after it you feel like there's some tools or some something that you see here that would be helpful for your whole staff to do, that would be an opportunity to engage with us. And to do that, again, you go to the Let's Grow Kids coronavirus webpage, and under the early educator section, there's a new web form that you can fill out. And once we receive that, we'll get you in touch with someone. A few additional reminders: BBF and CDD have 2 additional webinars on Fridays. It'll be tomorrow at 1. And also next Friday at 1, and that will walk you through some of the questions that you may be having about some of the logistics around all of the childcare that you're providing, and some of the questions you have for CDD. Ansley's going to drop that link into the chat bar now. You just have to copy and paste it to register for that. All resources, if you registered early, you may have received some resources before this call, but we'll also email anything out after to you. And post them as well. Another reminder, you are muted and we cannot see you. And we are at our homes. I just sent all of my family outside to play basketball, and it sounds like they're all coming back inside now, but we're working in various states of kids and animals and internet connectivity, so we are all doing our best. And they've been going well for the last 2 weeks, so hopefully that continues this time. We would ask that you use the Q&A function. It's really easy to use that chat function, and that's where Ansley is going to be dropping anything that we mentioned, but we would ask that you use the Q&A section. That allows us to easily field questions for the panelists, and it also allows us to keep all of your questions so that we can help offer additional resources to you if that's appropriate. Finally, at Let's Grow Kids, one of my personal favorite conversations to engage in is how all of the work that early educators are doing is really helping to build that foundation for our kids, so that when they get to be grown-ups and teenagers, they can really do the self-care for themselves and also care for others. So I think that it's just one of the most amazing things that you offer to our entire community, and I hope that this hour can provide at least a little bit of time for you to start doing that for yourself as well. So without further ado, I will introduce Lawrence Miller, who will start us off today.
Thank you, Emily. And I guess the first thing I want to observe is just how important the work you're doing is. And this really set home for me last night when I was reading some draft materials that CDC and FEMA are building for how we'll open up the country again. And it says the first step is going to be restoring the child care services so that everybody else can go to work, and that's a primary resource for the entire community as part of that core reopening thing. So, I think the state has shown that, the steps that they've taken, but I just want to acknowledge it personally. I also want to acknowledge when I'm about to talk about looking for opportunities, it can be really hard to think about looking at things like this as an opportunity. But we've got all these phrases: never let a crisis go to waste, which is attributed to so many people, it can be attributed to none. May you live in interesting times, which is definitely difficult to attribute. It is also definitely not a Chinese curse. And then JFK's famous quote that's gone global to the extent that it's used in China, even though the foundation of it is wrong. In the Chinese language, the word crisis is composed of two characters, one representing danger and the other opportunity. So do all those confused roots matter? I don't think so. These are phrases that are used in all languages that suggests to me that they harbor a universal truth. And life gives you lemons, make lemonade was the sampler on my great-grandmother's couch, and she lived through the Depression. So that's where we start from, but it's not easy. So let's talk about some tools, some practical tools that you can use going through this process. Next slide, please. The first thing is to empty your mind of worry. And I don't mean developing Zen mastery. That is not what we're after. This is just a very simple tool to get everything out of your brain where it occupies a lot of space that you need for other things. And so this is something I'm really encouraging people to do, is develop a risk log. And this is a living document that you can update as things change. It's not a static thing, but it is a place to put everything that is otherwise occupying space in your brain that is useful for other things. And the elements might include business and personal issues that you're wanting to think about. And so you just do a brain dump onto a piece of paper or into a spreadsheet, whatever tool works best for you. And then you think about how likely any of those risks are to come true and what the consequence of those would be if they came true. Really write a line or a paragraph summarizing why you think so today, because you're going to be looking at this later in a time of crisis, and then score it. Whatever scale works for you. Here we've used 1 to 3. The things that are high likelihood and high consequence, there you've got to think about, do I just need to completely change strategies so that I can avoid that risk? The things that are low likelihood and low consequence, you might just accept that risk. There isn't much to worry about there. If you can resolve it easily, go ahead and do so. It's those things that are on the edges that really deserve some time thinking about mitigation. If this were to happen, what would I do to respond? How would I minimize the impact on my business? Even if a low likelihood, high consequence event happened, what would I be looking for to change the status of that and change how much attention I pay to it? And this idea of what's a trigger point for a grade change. And this is really just again, empty your mind of these things, not carry them around with you, not have them come back to you, but be in their own safe place, not invasive. Next slide, please. So the next thing, now that you've got this brain dump out and your mind is clear, this is the time to step back and think, what is my vision? Based on what I've learned, what do I want to be different, perhaps? This is a big event. This COVID-19 event is a big event in world history terms, on the scale of major wars, depression, the last great pandemic in 1918. We know that many people find their priorities and values shift during these events, and they may not have shifted in just these first few weeks, but remember, we're going to be doing some form of physical distancing and social distancing for maybe 18 months, maybe longer, until a vaccine is available. And all of this is going to evolve, and that's one of the reasons I recommend these tools, so that you can come back to it periodically instead of have it be with you all of the time. And I find that being intentional about what you want is really important. So this list is a little bit different. This is an aspirational list. And as an aspirational list, we wanted to express in positives, not negatives. It isn't the things in your life you want to get away from. It's what in your life would you like. So I want less conflict with my spouse, or versus I want a happier life with my spouse. Those types of things. What do you wish was different about your business? If you were starting your childcare business again, what would you do differently? This is a tabula rasa, a fresh new start. What do you wish was different about your life? What do you wish were different about your relationships, whether it's with coworkers, staff, parents, family members, extended family members, and really look inside and say, wow, with this huge pandemic event, what inner truths and beliefs are changing for me? Reflect, revise, write them down. I guarantee you, as you go through this process, you're also going to have a whole new bunch of sets of worries come up, and they're going to invade your brain. It's a lot like meditation. That's all right. It's going to come up. Just go back to your risk log, put it over there, and come back to the aspirational part. Then once you've got that sense of vision, we can start to think about, how would you implement that vision? What are the things that would be triggers for that? So let's define this a little bit. When we think of risks, we think of those things as being external threats, but you can influence it by mitigating. Opportunities are also external and things you can influence. And so this opportunity log is sort of the flip side of the risk log. It says, what are the opportunities that might come up for me to change how I bill parents, or change how many hours I work, or make some physical improvements to my center or my home. Write a line or paragraph summarizing what success would look like taking advantage of an opportunity like that, and what those triggers might be, and then score them. Here, your high likelihood and high benefit items, those are your blue sky items. So you really figure out how you're going to make those happen for you, because they're going to make things a lot better. Low likelihood, low benefit. Not a lot of reason to spend any time on them. Stop, ignore, and then put some thought into, how can I really enhance my opportunity to achieve opportunities that aren't in those categories, that are in the middle, but that might make a difference. And I think it's also important to look at, what are precedents? You might have low likelihood, low benefit opportunities that increase the likelihood of medium or high opportunities. And it's just important to think through those fundamentals, and then to track the external triggers that would cause you to pursue one opportunity or another. But again, to achieve your vision, your business in service of you, your kiddos, and your parents. Thanks.
So I'm going to have you switch gears and just pause for a second and think about how many roles you're playing right now. And if you're multitasking while you're doing this Zoom call, that's pretty common too. So pause from that even and go, what are all the things you're doing? Because most of us are family members with family we're taking care of, have jobs that we're trying to balance, and everyone else in our life is looking for more from us because they're also in crisis. And the quote there, it's by David Allen. He does Getting Things Done, a system of kind of organizing your workflow. And he speaks a lot to what Lawrence was saying in terms of, once you put things out of your mind, you're able to move on and focus on what's important. And right now, something that's pretty common is people have so much on their mind, they can't focus on anything. And the idea of sitting down and really making a matrix, how do you fit that in? Next slide. And I just want to remind you that you're not alone. There are a lot of supports out there. And when you're in the midst of challenging times, sometimes it can be hard to remember they exist and to look to them for the support that they're there to provide. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Adaptiva HR and what we do, but mention that there are great consultants all over Vermont that do similar things that you could be working with, and Let's Grow Kids is going to help support you working with. We do HR consulting, but also we have an EAP, so an employee assistance program. If you don't have one, you should. They're a really inexpensive benefit for the amount of value you can get out of them. It gives employees licensed counselors that they can look to if there's any type of personal or professional issues going on where they need additional support, so that they're not looking at you as a supervisor to be that support for them. What your EAP is going to do for you has a little bit to do with what you're going to ask of them. A lot of us are stepping up. We've been doing some online support groups around this. We actually do a public one that anyone is welcome to come and join on Wednesday evenings at 5, and you're going to get the link to that. And then we also have been setting up specific ones for employees that are all working in the same company, and that allows us to work around scheduling and let you connect together. The other piece is looking to your benefits. You know, there are telehealth providers. If you do have mental health benefits, can you be encouraging employees or yourself that needs that support to take the time and get that support so that you can free your mind for other things? If you do have people that are concerned, and it might be an employee, it might be a parent, it might be yourself, and all of a sudden less financially secure, less emotionally secure, having needs that they aren't sure how to get help meeting them. I just want to mention that Vermont 211, which the United Way coordinates, is a great source for picking up the phone and going, gee, somebody's food insecure, or somebody needs a cell phone, or you know, that is not able to afford one and they're isolated. You know, all the odd things that you know someone needs support, that your first instinct might be to sit down and Google it and try to provide it. Instead, look to people who provide it on a regular basis, because they're going to be able to do it more quickly and efficiently, and it's going to take something off your plate. And again, there's also a lot of emerging resources around Vermont. There's mutual aid networks. There's other programs that are coming up specifically to support people around what's going on currently. And you're going to get a document, a link to a document that's crowdsourced that's sharing of those as well. Next slide. The other piece is, at the same time you're reaching out and you're getting information, really think about how much time and energy is going into information that's not necessarily the most important thing for you to be thinking about right now. You know, people are getting a lot of inflammatory news stories or looking to social media for information on what's going on, and it's not always accurate, and again, it causes a lot of extra anxiety. So figure out who your trusted sources are. And I have a big Let's Grow Kids there, because for you all, you have Let's Grow Kids as a great source of information, and also people who are helping you vet your other sources of information. So look to your attorneys, look to your payroll companies, your benefit providers, the State Department of Labor, but really, you are a professional, rely on professional resources. They're out there and they're available. Next slide. And then the other piece that we're doing to support businesses is just planning and communication. It lets you act rather than react. Think about what policies you want to have in place at this time. You're going to get a sample infectious disease policy with your materials from this as well. That's something we've drafted and encouraged our employers to think about ahead of time, because if you have employees who are wondering, you know, what do I do if I'm coughing? Or what is our cleaning protocol and am I safe here? The more you can be thinking about the questions that are likely to come up for them and cause a panic and them reaching out to you, and early say, this is the way we're going to handle it, and we've thought about it, and we have a plan in place, and you have a resource you can look at, and then we'll be able to work through it together when we need to. You know, develop your processes. Think about, again, the risk that you would identify when you're doing Lawrence's exercise. What is going to be your mitigation? What's going to be your action? And as you're doing that, really think about your short and long-term planning, because you kind of have the immediate, this is the situation, and it's very easy to focus on reacting to that. But again, how do you ramp back up? How do you transition? And are you keeping the financial and the human resources to be able to do that without stress? Next slide. And I will pass on.
You couldn't hear me. I apologize. Thank you. So I wanted to just acknowledge that we all know that we should be using this time to do the strategic planning work that Lawrence is describing. We also know that at the same time, we need to take care of the people who work for us, for the families that we serve, and we need to take care of our own families. And it's so natural and so normal for us to take so much care of everybody else that we forget all about ourselves. And oftentimes we forget about ourselves until it's too late. So I wanted to just be able to offer all of you some resources and some tools to think about to ensure that you are putting yourself first, because without caring for yourself, you can't do the amazing work that all of you want to do each and every day. So let's switch to the next slide, please. So I wanted to start with a wellness check-in. And it's really important to recognize that each one of us are responding to the virus in different ways. And there is not a right way or a wrong way. Some days we feel like we are our most productive and compassionate selves and we can conquer the world. And other days we don't want to get out of bed. And that might change minute to minute, hour to hour. Some of us may soothe ourselves by reading lots of media and accessing information and just trying to get as much information as we can, as quickly as we can, so we can feel like we have some sense of control. And others of us might want to say, I don't want to read a single thing. All I want to do is just look at Facebook and just chill out a little bit. And that's totally okay too. So it's really important to recognize for yourself, what do you need so you can feel cared for? And acknowledge that the people around us might want or need different things. And so I want to invite you all for a minute just to take a deep breath and close your eyes and just think for a moment and notice, how are you feeling right now in this moment? Just think about what it is you're feeling, what it is you're noticing. That simple check-in is a practice that you can do multiple times throughout the day, just to remind yourself of where you are. And as you're doing that, you can recognize that your wellness and your well-being is multidimensional. Sometimes you need to feel physically well. And we know we need to do things like exercise, like eat well, stretch, get rest. Sometimes we need to be emotionally well. Sometimes we need to take care of ourselves socially if we're feeling disconnected or if we're feeling like we miss the people who are closest to us. Sometimes we need to get in touch with our spiritual side. We need to challenge our intellectual side, or sometimes our intellectual side might be so challenged that we need to just take it down a notch and let go. We have an opportunity to look at our jobs and how are we feeling about our comfort in our jobs, and that's where some of the tools that Lawrence offered can be so helpful. And we need to take care of our own space and make sure that we're feeling as comfortable as we can in our own space. And so I invite all of you to think about, on a simple scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling in each of these areas? And then to identify just one area where you feel like you need to focus. And think for yourself, what is one simple thing that you can do as soon as we get off this call to increase that rating by just 1 or 2? We're not going for 10s, but if you're currently at a 5, what would it look like to get to a 6? And what can you do right now? So often, especially when we're feeling stressed, we think to ourselves, I don't have time. Or I know I'm never going to exercise as much as I want, or I know I'm never going to declutter my entire house. And therefore we stall and we don't do anything. And so my challenge to all of you is to find what is just one thing you can do for just 5 minutes. If that means you're going to get outside and walk around the block for 5 minutes to clear your head, do that. If you want to pick one corner of one closet and say, I'm going to take 5 minutes and just go through things and do some filing, try that. Write an email to a friend you haven't connected with in a while. And I challenge each of you to find a couple of 5 to 10 minute bursts a day and check in on the impact that it can have on you. And it's also important to just recognize that each one of us respond to expectations differently. If you are someone who is a scheduler, put wellness breaks in your schedule or structure your day so you make and have time to take care of yourself. If you like to be more spur of the moment, go wherever your whim takes you and recognize that if you're feeling the need to go play outside, go play outside. And if you're someone who does amazing work when others are paying attention or when others are noticing, find someone you care about and ask them to hold you accountable. So the opportunity is to figure out what works best for you, where do you need to check in with yourself, and what is one small, simple, practical action you can take right now to make sure you're taking care of yourself. And as you're taking care of yourself, Natalie, we'll switch to the next slide, please. It's also important that we spend our time and precious energy focusing on what we can control. I'm not sure how many of you are experiencing this, but I know that it is so common to say, I have so much more time right now because I'm not traveling, I'm not going places during my day, and I'm home around the weekends. I should be able to get a ton done. But it's also normal for all of us who are saying, I'm actually getting less done right now. I'm not my uber productive self. I know I should be, but I'm not. And that's totally normal during periods of uncertainty and periods of change. And part of that is because we have a set amount of time and energy. And when we are managing through periods of uncertainty, our productivity dips. And oftentimes it dips because we're spending so much of our time and energy focusing on things that concern us, very real things. What are going to happen to the families that I'm serving? When is this peak going to be over? What's going to happen to my town when we get on the other side of this? How is my family that's on the other side of the country? All of those things that concern us zap our energy. And at the same time, it takes us from focusing on that which we can control. And so as you're thinking about the lists that Lawrence encouraged you to brainstorm and clearing your head of all this clutter that's in your head, you can also take that information and try to identify what are those things that I can directly control and how can I spend my time and energy in that space? And maybe I can't control it, but I can influence it. How can I use my influence to make a difference? And all that stuff I'm concerned about that is so real, how can I limit the amount of time and energy that I spend focusing in that area of concern? And in the toolkit that Let's Grow Kids will email you afterwards, you will see a number of tools that will help you really brainstorm and get all of that information out. But given the limited time and energy that you do have, if you can spend that time focusing on what you can control, it might free up some capacity and some headspace to allow you to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And so just to close, and we'll close on the last slide, I love this quote. In dealing with those who are undergoing great suffering, if you feel burnout setting in, if you feel demoralized and exhausted, it's best for the sake of everyone to withdraw and restore yourself. The point is to have a long-term perspective. How can you use this opportunity to recognize that what you are experiencing is your experience, and you're going to have really good days and you might have some really low days, and to pay attention to those days and to take care of yourself so you can look back when we emerge through this period of time and say, wow, I did everything I could to take care of myself, to take care of the families that I care about, and to make sure that my business is as strong as it can be. And if we can all do that, we'll all weather through all this as strongly and healthily as we can together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lawrence and Angela and Erica. So sometimes we have a lot of questions, and there are a couple on the table, and I just want to remind folks, several of you asked if and where you can have access to these resources. All the slides will be posted along with handouts and the webinar itself. So you'll have access to everything that you just heard and saw after we're finished here. I think it takes about 24 hours for the actual recording to be posted. But I was thinking, as one early childhood educator to a lot of other early childhood educators, about how often we're the grown-up in the room who has to hold it together when kids are feeling the feels. And I just wanted to give you permission, if you haven't already given yourself permission, to feel what you feel. And I really appreciate our panelists taking some time today to share their professional expertise to support us as we go through this. So one of the questions, oh, there was another question I want to address too. Some folks asked about professional development hours, and this was not an approved training for professional development. And what I posted on the Q&A board, if you didn't happen to see it, is that this is just a gift to yourself. So I encourage you to receive it as a gift to yourself. And I was thinking about how some self-care is immediate, and so you'll get to use the current wellness check-in. And some self-care takes a little planning and intention, and some practices require strategizing and a higher level of planning. And often those sort of longer range invitations that you just heard about have to be planned in concert with others. So the question that one question that perhaps there's more information about, is there a document that can be used to organize the risk assessment log? And we saw the risk assessment log, but I'm wondering, is there another document that will come out with the handouts? And Lawrence, can you speak to that?
I don't have a specific document, and that's because everybody's mind works differently. And so fitting into the spreadsheet that I use isn't necessarily going to be natural for somebody else. I have another client who's very artistic, so their risk log sort of is a notebook with sketches and neat drawings as they think through everything associated with one risk on one page. And others find a journal type of activity appropriate. Other people are most comfortable in Microsoft Word. So it's really what tool works for you when you're feeling introspective. The principles will be in the deck, but I find giving somebody a tool that they are comfortable with is not super helpful. If you go online though, you could Google risk log or risk register. In project management speak, it's called a risk register, and scroll for options that you see, and there might be templates in Google and other places as well. Find something that looks like it feels like the way you think.
I think that's a great answer for a lot of things. When we have options, choose the one that works for you. It's going to be most successful if it resonates with the way you think and the way you organize your world. We have quite a bit of time for more questions if you have more questions. And I would also say, if this feels like you just want to sit with it for a bit and maybe you don't really have a lot of questions right now and you'd rather take the time to explore the materials, that's also okay. We do have a few more things to share with you before we sign off, and which will allow you some time to post questions on the Q&A. But sometimes when something ends early that I've already allotted the time for, I consider that a small gift of time to myself. So perhaps you'll get a gift of time.
Well, I'd like to make two observations after watching. What I hadn't quite realized was that all three of us would be speaking to a concept that David Allen uses as a tool. And so you might take something away from that alone, which is that exploring David Allen's Getting Things Done might be something that you find helpful, because we seem to be coalescing around that. The other thing is a funny story about the Dalai Lama, that great quote that Erica closed with, and the importance of self-care and little moments of joy. So this is a guy who travels all over the world. He's been thrown out of his home, manages to laugh all of the time. And he came to Vermont a couple of years ago, and I had the privilege of going to a luncheon there. He was speaking at Middlebury College, and they called him up to do his talk at the exact time that dessert was served to the table. So what did this deep spiritualist do? He grabbed his own piece of chocolate cake and the piece of chocolate cake I wasn't going to eat and brought them up to the podium, because he sure wasn't going to miss dessert just because of work.
Yeah, I also have a couple observations to make. I really appreciated the tools that Erica shared, and you have a great voice. I loved listening to you as you spoke. And I use them sometimes, but my personal confession is sometimes I get very work focused and don't remember to stop and do those things. And when I'm looking for motivation, sometimes I fall back on, what am I modeling right now? If really my priority is so much other people that I'm stressing myself, am I really helping them, or am I giving them an example of unhealthy behavior right now? And so sometimes if you need like the little bit more mental to allow yourself permission to do what she was suggesting, that can help get me there.
Angela, what you just said reminded me of my question throughout this, which is that we all often know what we're supposed to do, but actually getting started is really challenging. And so I'd be curious to hear from Erica and Lawrence and Angela. Each of you probably encounter clients who come to you because they have problems, but then you give them suggestions and then it's hard to actually get them to do things. So I wonder if you have any tools or tips that have worked for clients who may be stuck.
Yeah. It is so easy to know what to do. There's nothing in my table that you all didn't already know, but actually taking that first step is so challenging. And that's why I think really knowing what works for you. There's a author, Gretchen Rubin. She's fantastic, and she has this great model called the 4 tendencies, and it's a simple model and an online quiz, and we can actually include this in the toolkit if you'd like. That allows people to figure out how do they respond to expectations. And I was using some of the language in my talk. If you are an upholder, you're a rule follower. You need to schedule something. You need to make a commitment to yourself, and you're going to get it done. I'm going to go for a run at 5:30 in the morning, and if it's in your calendar, you're going to do it. That's not most of the population. Most of the population are what's called obligers. Those are those people who get things done because others are paying attention, because they don't want to let people down. So if you know that you want to clean out a closet and you keep avoiding it, and you know it would make you feel better, but something's keeping you from doing it, tell one of your family members, I'm going to clean out this closet today and I want you to ask me about it. So ask for accountability. Then there's another group of people that are questioners. They need to get the facts, the data, and the information to prove that it's the right thing to do. So I just suggested that getting in touch with your spiritual wellness is important. The questioner might say, show me the evidence. Where's the proof in all of that? And so if you're a questioner, if you want the evidence, if you want the proof, do your reading, do your homework, do your analysis, but also recognize that sometimes too much analysis is too much. And sometimes that 5-minute rule of just getting started is so helpful. And then there's my favorite group, the rebels. We're the people that want to do what we want to do when we do it, and no one's going to tell us what to do. And if that's how you are wired, just recognize that in yourself and think about what your own identity is and how you want to define yourself, and then make your quest of getting started, link it back to your identity. So Gretchen Rubin's resources are fantastic for giving you those little nuggets for how you can get started for yourself. And we could do a whole session on habit change, and I'm getting excited just thinking about it. But I want to give Lawrence and Angela a chance to offer their insights as well.
Well, when Erica started talking and said the first step, that whole piece of the first step and defining the first step is frequently what we see. So we're often going into organizations where there's some cultural issues or some management issues where styles aren't matching. And people are just overwhelmed, and they know it's not healthy and they know it's not good, but they don't know how to approach moving it in a more positive direction. And I do think that it's breaking it into tiny steps that feel achievable and manageable, and then implementing those to notice the tiny successes and get the momentum. Because as you're starting to see results, you become willing to commit more time. You know, don't try to do everything all at once. Don't look at the big picture and think you need to move from 1 to 10. The move from 5 to 6, and what does it take to move there? Being realistic about that and very clear on what your step is makes a big difference from what I've seen.
Yeah, I'll echo that completely. And I'm not even talking about clients. It's, I mean, just what works for me. And, you know, often I get stalled because I sometimes take on these really big projects that are going to take months. And even that first step of sitting down to chart out what a work plan might look like is big. So the first step is go review that scope, or, you know, okay, plant a garden this year. This is the year we're going to plant a garden. Well, where do you start? What do you want to plant? How much space are you going to need? You know, and work through each of those so that the next step isn't build raised beds. The next step is stake out where the raised beds are going to go. The step after that is figure out how much lumber you need to buy. Go buy the lumber. Really get it down to something that you can do in chunks of time that are available to you. And one of the things that David Allen talks about is breaking those things into buckets that might be like activities. So if your brain is in a place where you want to make some phone calls, you've got a bunch of different projects that have phone calls involved. Well, you can go do those phone calls. Or if you've got a bunch of errands to do, you can group your errands. Some of us wind up just going back to the hardware store 3 times where it's not actually a project. But, you know, if you can avoid that, that's really nice. But that tiny little thing, what's the smallest increment that you can do that will start something is, I agree with Angela, that's the most important tool that I've learned.
Thank you, panelists. Any other questions from our audience? Trey?
All right. Well, if we can flip to the last slide, I just want to remind folks about some of the resources that Emily mentioned at the beginning. And I am going to just add a couple as well. But before I do that, that was such a great question, Emily, and I can't resist just chiming in one observation or one idea as well. This is something that really helps for me, is using the calendar in my Outlook, my online calendar, to drive priorities that I'm trying to get done. So if I know I need to get started on a project, or if I know I have identified, like Lawrence said, what that first step is going to be, I actually embed that as a work time into my calendar and say, okay, so Tuesday from 10 to 10:30, I'm going to take that first step and I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. And so partly as a self-accountability mechanism, it comes up for me at that time. And then when I rationalize my calendar at the end of the day, if I didn't do it, I am going to go back and and find that half an hour the next day or the day after that and put it in there. Another thing, which is I used to find this humorous, and now I do it, as a routine, is use those to-do lists, like Lawrence was saying. And I usually put make to-do list at the top of the list so that when I finish, I can check the first thing off and say, okay, that is the smallest incremental thing I can do going forward to try and be effective is I've just made this list, check. So anyways, it's really fun to hear from these fantastic panelists. And so I want to say thank you to Lawrence, to Angela, to Erica. It's been such a pleasure hosting these with you these last few weeks, and we deeply appreciate your commitment to this field and to the folks who are out there. Thank you. And as was said at the outset, my goodness gracious, to all of you who have tuned in today and taking time to think about how to care for yourself so that you can care for your staff, so that you all can take care of our kids. This is it is such a gift that we have such a strong field in Vermont and that you all are so purposeful and professional in your work. So thank you. We absolutely need you. Now we need you when the economy gets going again, and we need you in the future for our kids and families. So there's a lot here. You've had a chance to look at it while I was paddling on there for a minute. But as a reminder, we have a COVID-19 resource page at Let's Grow Kids website. You can look on there and find out more information about what we're doing and what we're saying, what the best practices are out there. And you can let us know if there is anything that we can help you with on an individual basis, something that is a nagging business or HR issue for your center, for your employees, for your business. Please let us know by using that web form, or if it's easier to just email me or one of the panelists, we will figure out how to get you either a response from Let's Grow Kids, or if it's in one of the core areas that our friends and consultants have been talking to you about, we'll connect you with them. And we're going to take care of that. We're going to set you up with a time to talk to them free of charge so that you can move forward. And by the way, what you heard today is core HR work. And so if taking care of yourself and taking care of your staff, or learning more about EAP, or learning more about other online tools for this is what you need help with, let us know. We are delighted to be able to offer that, and we really want to make it work. We've already been making some referrals of questions that people have asked, and we have the capacity to do a lot more. So please go ahead and let us know. As Emily noted at the beginning, you see the dates there, and just a reminder that BBF, Building Bright Futures, along with the Child Development Division, are doing more seminars. Please tune in. And I believe that those are, the one that was done last week is already posted online at the BBF website. So we'll try to make sure we send you that link. And if you can't tune in tomorrow, you can always tune in afterwards. So
I also wanted, oh, sorry, Trey, may I interject? We got another question.
Please.
So someone asked, do you have advice for someone changing from being a home provider to working in a center with non-recurring clientele? And I can say that that is a lot of change.
It certainly is a lot of change. And if you really want to understand sort of the technical side of navigating through CDD's requirements and how to do the childcare side of that, I think that's something we'd love to help you with at Let's Grow Kids. And if you have questions about the legalities of that, or how to stand up a new business in a new form, please let us know. You may have been operating as a sole proprietorship, sort of a doing business as entity without a limited liability company or an S corporation or something like that. But it may be that's the best thing for you to do going forward, and we can help you think that through. You may want to be not for profit because you'd like people to be able to give donations, and that's something that we could talk to you about as well. That's a great question. And per the training that we just had, and per the conversation we just had, those are the things that we're hoping people are thinking about right now. What more can I do, or what different can I do that's going to enrich my life and make me more effective?
I'll also say that if this question is more about you as an individual shifting from working for yourself as a home provider to working for somebody else in a center, that's also a big psychological change. And I've found that going from working at home alone to working in an office environment back and forth every few years is always a big change. And it takes, a few weeks to get into the new rhythm, but it takes more like 3 months to get everything familiar. And I think that idea of just knowing that you're going to be a little uncomfortable in that different environment, get adapted to a commute, and all of those things that change when you change venues, those are just very deep human changes to prepare for. As Brenda said, it's a lot.
A great time for self-care.
Yeah, it's a full
Anytime
portion.
is a great time for self-care. I just think when we are experiencing significant changes, it sometimes rises more to the fore for us.
So speaking of so all things professional development, and the question that was raised earlier about whether or not this is a training or just a webinar for you, there are some Northern Lights approved trainings that we want to make you aware of, and those are, like I said earlier, you've had a chance to see those there. The supporting parent and child connections, obviously the April 15th one was yesterday, but there's another tomorrow. Resilience, strength, and creating positive change, ASQ3, and using your GPS. So how to, what is the financial guide for reopening your business? Those are all upcoming. Along with, there's a resource at the bottom about, shared services and how to connect with families and be effective in that way. So that is another resource coming up. The 1 p.m. obviously is happening right now, but there's one at 6 tonight. And then there's one upcoming resource or one upcoming event that isn't listed here, but I want to mention that we are going to do another webinar next Thursday, and we're planning one for the Thursday after that. Next Thursday, we're planning to bring folks in to talk to you a little bit more on the business side about how you should be documenting the different sources of revenue that might be coming in now, how you should be planning your tax filings for next year, thinking about what you need to do now in terms of trust payments. We've mentioned a couple of those things along the way in previous sessions, but if you are interested in hearing from our friends, some very specific tips about what we're all going through right now and how to document, how to be prepared, how to make sure that you don't have any surprises next February or April, we'll be putting that on next week. Otherwise, I think unless Emily or Brenda has more to add,
I had one
I'm going to say thank you and goodbye and hand it back to Emily.
Thank you. I just had one closing thought as we were going through this. One of my favorite 4-year-olds had a birthday yesterday, and she wanted to have a mail theme. So her mom made her some cakes that looked like mailboxes. And it reminds me, I've been writing a lot more letters to friends. And even though it's for someone else, it really feels like self-care. And so to the extent that it works for you, one way to get started might be to offer your address to your families and ask for theirs, because I know that it's just absolutely thrilling for kids to get mail, and I can confirm for myself that it feels really good to send it to. So that's my last parting thought, and I thank all the panelists for such good suggestions. I'm actually going to sit down and do some of it. Thank you.
Take good care.